Okay, good afternoon. My name is Howard Black. I'm the Director of Communications for the District Attorney's Office. I want to just give you just a quick overview of what we're going to do with the presser here. We're going to start out with District Attorney Michael Allen. We'll be making his notes and comments to all of you. Then all of the media, you have a list of the order that we're going to go into. I don't want to spend a lot of time going through spelling of names. But from Michael, we'll go to the Chief of Police of Colorado Springs. From the Chief, he'll introduce the Mayor of Colorado Springs. From the Mayor, we'll go to the past Mayor of Colorado Springs. From the past Mayor, we'll go to the SAC, the FBI, so the Special Agent in Charge of the Denver Field Office. From there, we'll go to the Colorado Springs Fire Department. And our last speaker will be County Commissioner, who will give her thoughts. Once we move through everyone giving their comments, we'll go to a question and answer period of time. I'll come back up here. We have two mics. We are live streaming this. We have two mics that we'll get back to each reporter as you're asking the questions. At the conclusion of the questions and answer time, we will be moving into maybe a 2 or 3 minute delay in that we're going to be cutting our live feed, and then we will be bringing in victims and family members to speak to all of you. So with that, I'd like to introduce Michael Allen.
Today marks an important step in the recovery journey for the victims and family members of the Club Q shooting and for our community here at the foot of America's mountain. As District Attorney, I'm constantly humbled and honored to serve this community along so many people who are committed to the pursuit of justice. That pursuit can at times seem daunting and unrelenting, but through the strong relationships we have fostered here, the journey is one that we never walk alone. We walk it in service to this community and to the victims of this horrific act. Collaboration and thanks to fellow law enforcement agencies is paramount to this effort today. The relationships we have in the law enforcement community here in the 4th Judicial District is unmatched and speaks to the commitment to public safety shared by everyone in the Pikes Peak region. Colorado Springs Police Department had a quick and decisive response, including loading grievously wounded victims into patrol vehicles and rushing them to area hospitals. That is coupled by the response from Colorado Springs Fire Department, who did the same thing. Were on scene as quickly as they possibly could and began jumping to the service of people that were injured beyond belief. The efforts of both of those agencies undoubtedly saved lives. And I and this community are indebted to their service. I want to thank the FBI. Their extensive law enforcement response helped us build a case that reached a maximum possible sentence in a relatively short amount of time. Cases of this magnitude rarely are resolved this quickly, but it's thanks to the commitment, the resolve, the partnership, and the relationships we have in this community with our agencies, law enforcement agencies that helped us get here. AMR and other emergency medical service providers at our local hospitals also played an integral role in saving people's lives as a result of the shooting that occurred on November 19th of 2022. I want to thank current Mayor Yemi Mobilati for being here today, as well as former Mayor and potentially more importantly, former District Attorney John Suthers for being here today too. His insights into what we do in the DA's office, truly he's been a shining example for DAs across the state and is certainly a hero of mine. I also want to thank County Commissioner Kami Bremer for being here today as well, who represents the area in which Club Q sits. I'd certainly be remiss if I didn't mention the DA's office team that helped in this prosecution and really did a phenomenal job in reaching this result today. From Ben Hostetter, Reggie Short, Jennifer Veeman, all of the paralegals and legal assistants and those folks that helped us get here today. And then, potentially most importantly, lead detective from CSPD, Rebecca Joins, who is the consummate professional and has a dedication unmatched in my experience as a prosecutor and working with lots of detectives over time. Thank you, Rebecca, for all of your service to this community. I want to reiterate what this plea agreement is and what it means. 5 consecutive life sentences. 1 life sentence for each murder victim. Kelly Loving, Daniel Aston, Derek Rump, Ashley Paw, and Raymond Green Vance. Plus 48 years for each person the defendant in this case attempted to murder that night, running consecutively, totaling 2,208 years on top of those 5 consecutive life sentences. That is the longest sentence ever achieved in the 4th Judicial District, and the second, to my knowledge, longest sentence ever achieved in the state of Colorado, second only to the sentence achieved in the Aurora Theater shooting case. This defendant committed an act of terror against a malign group of people based on ideological hatred for that community. And I, as district attorney, and I know the people behind me, will not stand for that kind of hatred and criminal effort in this community. We will work tirelessly to stand up for victims, no matter their place in society. This plea also means that there are no potentials for appeal. It means that these victims don't get drugged through the judicial process years down the road. It means no prolonged court process that would have prevented the victims and their family members from starting that healing process. This plea agreement quite simply holds the defendant accountable to the maximum extent possible under the law in the state of Colorado. I want to reiterate what I've said in the past on other cases. The support from the community as a whole and the very people victimized in this case. Your support for this effort makes today possible. And I want to thank each and every one of you for sticking with us through this effort. It's something that was not chosen by you. It was something that was thrust upon you by one person filled with hate. The cowardly acts of this defendant started before, carried on through, and during the attack, and continue even to today. He intentionally evaded background checks in obtaining the firearms that he used in Club Q on November 19th. He attacked an unarmed and suspecting nightclub where people were gathering with friends and family and loved ones to enjoy a night of revelry, including birthdays. He armed himself in a way that indicated he knew what he was about to do was wrong, and that he was willing to kill as many people as possible. When he was stopped in the attack, he then started blaming other people for the attack, likely trying to blame Richard Fierro for what was happening inside the club, saying that he was the shooter. He attempted to live stream the attack, surely to further victimize members of the LGBTQ+ community. As I said, those cowardly acts continued to statements made to the media after the shooting and even in court today. They were self-serving. He pointed to drug use and other issues to paint himself as a victim. Nothing could be further from the truth. He harbored hatred and a commitment to violence towards the LGBTQ+ community. He ran a website dedicated to the hate of minorities and members of the LGBTQ+ community. He armed himself to the teeth. He went through extensive planning, including hand-drawn diagrams of Club Q, plans that really amount to battle plans. He was stopped thanks to the heroic action of some very important people in this case. First and foremost, Tom James, an actively serving member of the United States Navy. He was on the shooting patio outside Club Q. As the defendant approached that area of the club, he moved himself towards the doors that the shooter would come through In the process, he was struck in the abdomen. Despite being wounded by a gunshot wound, he engaged with the shooter and undoubtedly saved countless lives. His actions were quite simply heroic, selfless, and an example of humanity that we should all strive to achieve. Because he was wounded, his strength was quickly draining from him, and he was joined by Richard Fierro, who carried on the attack on the defendant. And then finally by Drea Norman, who made sure to stop the defendant from escaping. The combined heroics of these three individuals undoubtedly saved, as I said, countless lives. The targets inside Club Q were not political slogans. They weren't ideological pawns in some bigger game. They were people. Each person inside that club, like all of us, held the inherent right to life that we all hold dear. I want to talk just a minute about the guns that he used. The handgun frame that the defendant carried in to Club Q on November 19th was purchased by his mother, thereby allowing the defendant to escape any background checks that would have been required had he lawfully purchased that handgun. All other gun parts that were used inside of Club Q were similarly unserialized, meaning he evaded effectively all ATF background check requirements for the weapons that he possessed on November 19th and carried into the club to commit his attack. That evidence shows his intent. He intended to evade law enforcement as much as he possibly could. He intended to evade background check processes to keep his plans secret as long as he could. I want to talk about the death penalty just briefly. The death penalty still matters, even if it's not law in the state of Colorado. The death penalty, the threat of the death penalty in the federal system were a big part of what motivated this defendant to take this plea in our case here in the 4th Judicial District. The death penalty still matters. Cases like this are why the death penalty should exist in the state of Colorado. The victims in this case deserve the ultimate punishment that the law can provide. And they were robbed of that by changes in the law just a few short years ago. With that, I want to close with some words from the Declaration of Independence, a founding document of the United States of America. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, people, are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And everyone in the 4th Judicial District in the state of Colorado can hold dear to those words. And you have the commitment of this office, our law enforcement partners, and this community to protect that right. With that, I would turn it over to Adrian Vasquez, the Chief of Police for Colorado Springs Police.
Well, thank you, everybody. Good afternoon, and thank you for being here on this incredibly important day. While the tragedy that began on November 19th of 2022 brought us down this road, today we have some solace that justice was swift. We understand that the families of those killed in the Club Q shootings will never get their loved ones back, and those injured will never forget what they went through, what they saw, or what they felt. But I want you to know that we will never forget. From the beginning, we've strived to give the victims the dignity and the respect that they deserve. Today, we remember those we lost, those who were injured, and all of those people still recovering from these evil acts. The sense of loss reverberated through our entire community. So today is not about the defendant, but about the strength of the victims and the justice being sought for them and for our community as a whole. I want to remind everyone of the individuals who were in Club Q on November 19th. People's lives were irrevocably changed that night. And there were 5 unique individuals who lost their lives. They were Kelly Loving, Daniel Aston, Derek Rump, Ashley Paw, and Raymond Green Vance. Thank you to the victims and their families for trusting in us to seek justice on your behalf. Let's talk about the heroism, and Michael mentioned heroism, and there certainly was that night. During this incident, Thomas James, after being shot, immediately and without hesitation, physically engaged the suspect, fighting with him even after having been shot. And I watched that and was just amazed. Robert Fierro joined the fight, and together those two stopped the immediate violence from happening, inspiring, truly amazing, and heroic. Later, Thomas James, after laying on an ambulance gurney, suffering from the wounds of gunshot, saw another victim who was severely injured and gave up his gurney for that victim. If that isn't inspiring, I don't know what is. Thank you to everyone in the LGBTQ plus community for your patience and strength in this time of devastation. Thank you to former Mayor Suthers for your leadership, and to the greater Colorado Springs community for your compassion and support of everyone affected. Thank you to all of our local and federal law enforcement partners for quickly coming to assist us in our diligent and thorough pursuit of justice. Partnerships like we see here in the 4th Judicial District with all of our local agencies, with our federal law enforcement partners, with our medical staff, AMR, our hospitals, is not seen in other parts of the country to the extent that it's seen here. And I'm so fortunate and thankful that we live in a community like Colorado Springs. Finally, thank you to the 4th Judicial District Attorney's Office for a swift and just conclusion to the state legal prosecution. I have received a formal request from the United States Attorney's Office requesting that we do not release any documents, evidence, or videos due to their active investigation. While the conclusion of the state investigation has resulted in justice being found for our victims, CSPD will honor the continued pursuit of justice at the federal level and will not be releasing anything at this time. When the judicial process at the federal level has concluded, we will be releasing video and documents, but for now, we continue pursuing justice. I ask the media and every person who watched today's proceedings to remember the people shown or described are people who we care about. Please show them the respect they're owed by all of us. I know that no words I say today can change the loss of your family members. Words can't help those who were injured heal faster. They can't remove the trauma suffered by so many in the club and in the LGBTQ plus community. What I hope today does is remind everyone that you are not alone. Every member of the police department stands by you today, tomorrow, and in the future. We are here for you and have been honored to stand with you as you have shown the world what love and strength is. And with that, I'd like to introduce the Honorable Mayor Yemi Mobilati.
Good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the survivors and the family members and friends in the house. We see you, we remember you, and we will be here for you. And that's my pledge to you. Friends, today justice has been served. First of all, I'd like to thank District Attorney Michael Allen for leading this effort with professionalism transparency, and the utmost respect for the victims, survivors, the family members of the LGBTQIA2+ community, and everyone in Colorado Springs and beyond who has been impacted by this tragedy. My thanks to Police Chief Adrian Vasquez and Deputy Fire Chief Jamie McConaughey and their teams for their response in minutes, hours, and now months that have followed. To our partners at the FBI and El Paso County, thank you. And to all those in the community and across the country and around the world who have supported the victims, survivors, and their families as well, we thank you. Friends, justice may have been served in the legal sense. However, the fight for justice and healing must continue. As we know, the pain lingers, and the weight of the loss that the LGBTQIA2+ community and that our Colorado Springs community shares is indeed heavy and very hard. And still, in the darkest of times, we choose to find the light as best as we can. In the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., only when it's dark enough can you see the stars. Therefore, I am proud of our community's efforts to come together to heal and remember. And I'm proud of all those who helped save lives that November night in the face of evil. 3 heroes whose selfless actions stopped further terror from happening, and they deserve much praise. And they are Tom James, Richard Fierro, and Drea Norman. Thank you, and thank you. Today and every day, we remember the victims of Club Q, and we remember our friends, Daniel Aston, Kelly Lovin, Ashley Paw, Derek Rump, and Raymond Green Vance. Borrowing from the Honorable Judge Michael McHenry's words earlier today, he mentioned that hate will not be tolerated, that the LGBTQIA2+ community is as much part of our human family as anyone. And yes, indeed, we will hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal and created in the image of God. And as we begin this next phase of recovery, as your mayor, I will work to build a city where everyone has the right to thrive and be safe and be welcome and be seen as they are. We are Colorado Springs. It is now my pleasure to welcome a great leader who has stood with Colorado Springs, and this is our former mayor and my predecessor, John Suthers.
Thank you, Mayor. As I said the morning after this tragedy, it's our job as citizens of Colorado Springs and this entire community to ensure that our community is defined by our response to this incident and not by the acts of an evildoer. And I am absolutely convinced at this point in time that history will judge it just so, that our community will be defined by our response to this heinous crime. Given my career, I think what I can add most to this discussion is to talk a little bit about the response of law enforcement. I've had the opportunity throughout my career to either be involved in or an observer of major investigations of heinous crimes, beginning with the Columbine incident, the Aurora theater shootings. And I can assure the victims and our community that the law enforcement response that took place to the Club Q shootings was in the finest traditions of law enforcement. The response that night was immediate. Not only did First responders arrive in time to probably save lives among victims. They quickly secured the scene and ensured that this would be a absolutely excellently conducted crime scene investigation. Beginning that night, the FBI was there within hours. That crime scene was secured, and I saw the meticulousness to which that crime scene was processed. And I knew right there that that would pay off down the road. Well, we're here today to acknowledge the fact that that incredible work that took place immediately in response to the crime has paid off with the disposition of this case. But the law enforcement response wasn't just the investigation of the crime scene and the follow-up. It was also making sure that the law enforcement agencies of the 4th Judicial District and the federal government, that their victim services programs were brought to bear on this case and for the benefit of the victims. Every single victim in that club was assigned a victim advocate. And that was very, very important. This was done right, and I, based on my experience, can assure our community and the victims of this crime that the disposition reached today, in light of the state of the law in Colorado without a death penalty, this is the best possible disposition that could have taken place. Justice was achieved to the maximum degree allowed under the laws of the state of Colorado. And I want to thank the law enforcement community that's represented here today for the excellent work that they did that resulted in this disposition. And with that, it's my privilege to introduce Mr. Mark McCulloch, the Special Agent in charge of the Denver Field Office of the FBI.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the men and women of the FBI, let me first say that we share in the sorrow of the Colorado Springs and the greater LGBTQ+ community, and we extend our deepest sympathy to those who lost family and friends in this tragedy. The FBI has assisted with this investigation since that awful night in November, when we dispatched special agents and specialized investigative and forensic resources to support our local partners at the Club Q scene. But it wasn't just the police and fire personnel that we rushed to help. Our highly trained victim specialists were on the scene as well, working side by side with local counterparts to serve as victim advocates, to provide services for the victims and to provide emotional support for the victims and the families in the weeks and months that followed. The victim impact statements provided today in the El Paso County courtroom were powerful and were absolutely heartbreaking. Today is about those victims, those who lost loved ones, survivors who were physically harmed, and those who will live with the memories of the trauma they witnessed. What happened that night lives with them forever, just as it lives with the first responders, the broader LGBTQ+ community, and the citizens of Colorado Springs. While today's sentencing will not bring the victims back, let it serve as a reminder of the human impact of this horrific and senseless crime. It is our sincere hope that today's proceedings are an important milestone on a path that fosters healing and continued support for all affected. In law enforcement, our most fundamental duty is to ensure people can live free from fear. May the memories of the victims renew our sense of community and strengthen our partnership. The FBI is proud to stand beside the agencies represented here today and support all citizens of Colorado Springs. Working together, we can promote public safety and make a difference. That is why FBI Denver responded that night in November and why I am here today. We stood with you then, we stand with you now, and we will stand with you in the future. It's my honor to introduce the Deputy Fire Chief, Jamie McConaughey from the Colorado Springs Fire Department.
We recognize that lives were forever changed on November 19th. And that change happened in an instant for the victims, survivors, families, friends, the LGBTQ plus community, and thereby the community of Colorado Springs. In a world that can seem full of hate, Club Q provided a safe place for those to be their true and authentic selves. In an instant, a place normally filled with happiness and hope became one of tragedy and sorrow. As the mother of a gay son and the leader of a department of unique and diverse human beings, I feel your pain and I grieve your loss. As a department, we want you to know that we will carry your instant on our hearts forever. Every firefighter who raises their hand to serve is called by their heart to this profession and was honored to serve their community and their loved ones with the life-saving measure performed that fateful day. The heroism of the civilians that risked their lives to detain the shooter is the most important first step in this tragedy. I am confident that these three role models did not wake up that morning thinking about the difference they were going to make in many, many lives, yet through their bravery that occurred. Typically, in incidents of this nature, firefighters are staged on scene, awaiting the opportunity to do their jobs, while law enforcement do theirs, to ensure the safety of the scene and so that additional lives are not lost. Their heroic actions are what allowed our law enforcement officers to swiftly engage, thereby allowing the 39 firefighters that responded on 15 different units to include 4 engines, 3 trucks, 2 battalion chiefs, a tactical medical emergency unit, 4 rescue squads, and 2 medical lieutenants to immediately render aid as soon as they arrived on scene without delay. Without these heroic acts, there is no doubt we would be telling a very different story today. I would also like to commend our police officers that flooded the scene and very swiftly provided medical care as well. Their quick actions undoubtedly saved lives. We appreciate the support and response of our mutual aid partners, Fountain, Security, Monument, and Falcon Fire Departments, who assisted our ambulance transport provider, American Medical Response, by providing additional transportation and advanced life support medical care to the injured as our emergency medical system was overrun with the transport of 17 patients to local area hospitals. I would also like to acknowledge our hospital systems, UC Health and Centura, who virtually received no warning of what was rapidly approaching their emergency department doors by ambulance, fire, law enforcement, and those that were injured and drove themselves. With the first call coming into the dispatch center at 11:56 p.m. and the last victim transported from the scene at 12:29 a.m., this left little time for the trauma service lines at both hospitals to spring into action and immediately address numerous full trauma responses. The critical medical intervention that was provided made a significant impact on many lives. The saying that it takes a village was truly present on this day, and the collaborative work that we do within our community and region to prepare for mass casualty incidents well before the incidents unfold was felt in our community that night and certainly made a positive impact on the outcomes of the many that were injured. While we're proud of our efforts and the collaboration of our entire community, we will always be saddened by the lives that were lost and our inability to save all who were put in harm's way. Your loss will always be ours as well. Incidents of this magnitude do not just go away because the call ended, the last patient was transported, or the threat was mitigated. The grief, fear, anger, and so many other emotions may not go away today either because there is a conviction. While we cannot change the events of the past, we know that hope will always live on. Harvey Milk, the first openly gay elected official in California, who was assassinated in 1978 because of who he was, once said, "Hope is never silent." And it is our hope for every person that has been impacted. Today is where healing may begin. Thank you very much. And I'd like to introduce Cami Bremer, Chair of the El Paso County Commissioners.
Good afternoon. Today we gather here united as a community, bound together by a shared grief and a collective determination to heal. We condemn the heinous actions surrounding the tragedy that unfolded at Club Q, an act that shook our community to its core. But amidst the darkness, we find strength in the resilience and unity that defines us. First and foremost, let us express our heartfelt gratitude to the brave first responders who rushed into danger without hesitation. These selfless individuals put their lives on the line to protect and save others, embodying the very essence of heroism. Their courage and dedication remind us of our community's unwavering commitment to one another. We extend our deepest appreciation to the hospitals and medical professionals who worked tirelessly to provide swift and compassionate care to the wounded. In the face of unimaginable tragedy, their expertise and unwavering commitment to healing became a beacon of hope. They have shown us the remarkable power of compassion and resilience in the face of adversity. I also want to thank Michael Allen and the entire District Attorney's Office for their tireless efforts to bring justice to those affected by this senseless act. Pursuing justice is a critical step in the healing process, ensuring those responsible are held accountable for their actions. We stand together to support their work and dedication to seeking justice for every life impacted by this tragedy. Let us focus our energy on healing as a community. The wounds inflicted upon us are deep, but together we can find solace and strength in one another. We must embrace our differences and stand as a united front against hate and against violence. By fostering empathy and understanding, we can build bridges that span all divides, reinforcing the resilience of our community. In the days and the weeks ahead, let us continue our support and compassion for those most affected by this tragedy. Let us remember the victims with love and honor their memories by striving to create a community that rejects hatred, violence, and division. May we comfort in each other's embrace and work together to forge a future where every member of our community can live free from fear. Together, we will overcome this darkness, and together we will shine as a beacon of hope, unity, and healing. Thank you.
Okay, let's move into questions. A reminder, we're going to have 2 mics, and please, before you ask your question, we get a mic to you. Questions? Pauline.
Hi, I have a question for the FBI. Have you recommended that federal charges be filed against the shooter, and what charges?
I can confirm today that the Federal Bureau of Investigation has opened a federal investigation in coordination with the Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Division, Office for the District. In terms of the outcome of that investigation, it's still ongoing, but I would refer any questions about federal prosecution.
My question's for District Attorney Michael Allen. You mentioned that the mom, there's evidence that you guys have collected that Laura Vopel, the defendant's mom, gave him at least the AR-15 that he then went and used in the Club Q shooting. Can she be charged with any state charges for doing that?
So let me begin by apologizing if I created a misperception. She didn't provide anything that had to do with the AR platform that was carried in by the defendant on that November 19th night. What she had done was purchase the frame, the 9mm handgun frame. There's not evidence that we can determine when the defendant was able to get that from her. I think if we would have had evidence to charge her with something related to Club Q, we would have done that a long time ago. So there's not enough to connect those dots to sustain any criminal charges on that particular front.
Moment.
My question is also for the DA. I was wondering, in court, you had talked about how it's important to the community and to you personally to have those bias-motivated charges as well. Can you talk more about that? And then also, did you have a reaction to the shooter seeming to kind of search for words, have to think about if he understood what that meant?
Sure. Anytime we have a heinous criminal act, it's natural for us as people to want to know why something occurred. And those bias-motivated charges are why this occurred. And I think it's important to note that Colorado, as a state, has decided to include that as a potential charge to outlaw hate that is coupled with criminal activity. And that's exactly what those bias-motivated charges do, is they couple that hatred thought with criminal activity. And we're not going to tolerate that. We're not going to tolerate that here in the 4th Judicial District. More importantly, though, in lead up to what occurred here in court today, we had extensive meetings with all of the victims that were willing to participate in those. Some people are too traumatized to participate in those conversations, but the ones that could and were willing to engage in that, it became very apparent that overwhelmingly it mattered to them. And so for that, as the district attorney here in the 4th Judicial District, if it mattered to them, it mattered to me. As it relates to the defendant's conduct, as I said, he's a coward. Anytime you go into any establishment and you arm yourself the way that this defendant armed himself, knowing that where you're going and what you intend to do there, that the people inside there are unarmed and unable to effectively counter the firepower that you're bringing in, that is the epitome of being a coward. His statements to the media leading up to this plea today also indicate how cowardly he is, attempting to shed some sort of blame, blaming his drug use and steroids he mentioned. Cowardly. He knew exactly what he was doing. That's why he armed himself the way he did. That's why he wore a vest, a tactical vest inside the club. That's why he had flashbang devices attached to his vest. He knew what he was doing was wrong. He knew he was attacking an unarmed group of people, and he did it in a cowardly way. That's why when Tom James and Richard Fierro engaged with him, that's why he's tried to blame them for the shooting. He's a coward. And the comments and his actions in court today belie that idea, that he's a coward. That's why he struggled, coming up with the words and the justification for why he was taking a plea.
My question is for Mayor Yemi Mobolade. So during the hearing, many of the survivors say they still felt the terror of that day when they go to the grocery store, when they're at a gas station. Is there anything that you will be doing to make them, the LGBTQ plus community, feel comfortable in this city going forward?
Yes. So healing takes time. And as mayor, I'm fully aware that the LGBTQ plus community needs a mayor for the long haul. So I don't have any specifics, but I would tell you that I'm connected with a number of the members of the LGBTQ plus community, and as they need help as mayor, I'll be here to assist them, because this is going to be a long journey as the pain lingers in our community.
So there are efforts underway currently to build and start a resiliency center that is directly aimed at the LGBTQ plus community. Those efforts are underway. Members of my office have been involved in that, city officials as well, and then members of the LGBTQ plus community as well. So that will be hopefully a safe haven that will be able to address those concerns and help them through the healing process and to feel safe in this community. Every person, as we've said before, in the 4th Judicial District deserves the feeling of safety, to be at the grocery store and not have to worry about a shooting, to be at a nightclub and not have to worry about a shooting. But if a shooting occurs, know that we will use the full force of our efforts in the law enforcement community to hold them accountable.
DA Allen, this question's for you. I'm sorry, I'm over here. Can you explain why you accepted the no contest plea on the bias motivated crimes versus a guilty plea?
Because quite simply, the result is exactly the same, that he is found guilty in a court of law. It carries the exact same weight as if he had entered a guilty plea. More importantly, it was important that this case be marked for what it was, which was a terror attack based on hate for a particular community. But wanting to make sure that we achieve the quickest solution to this case to lessen the burden on the victims and the victim family members. If this case had proceeded towards a trial track, there's so many examples out there that this thing would have drug on for quite some time, which would have prevented folks from getting into that healing state that they can hopefully get into now, where they can stop worrying about what's happening in this case and can start worrying about how they heal and how they recover from this. And so that was a small price to pay, knowing that it's the exact same result, but getting a quick resolution to this case, knowing that it shortcuts any potential for appeal, as I mentioned earlier. That's a huge one. When we have, community impact cases like this that go to trial, you have mandatory appeals, you have other things that happen in the case, and it just continues to reopen the wounds for victims, and this prevents that as well. So it was a very small price to pay to achieve the maximum potential sentence in this case.
Mr. Allen, I had a question for you. Do you have an opinion on whether federal charges should be pursued by the U.S. Attorney's Office against this defendant?
So, obviously I don't have any jurisdiction over the federal system. I can't dictate how or what is pursued there. But I think my statements at the very beginning were quite clear. I think that this case is exactly the kind of case that deserves a death penalty option. There exists for this case only one death penalty option, and that is at the federal level. And I'll leave it at that.
My question is for District Attorney Allen as well. There's been speculation throughout this that the defendant was using non-binary pronouns solely as a defense tactic. What is your position on that?
Well, I'd like to use some very blunt language, but I'll keep it proper because we've got so many people here. I thought it was, again, another mark of his cowardice. I think he was trying to latch onto something to avoid the bias-motivated charges, but also trying to avoid potentially what could happen in the federal system. As I said, the death penalty in the federal system, I think, is a big reason why this defendant decided to take a guilty plea with the sentence that we achieved in this case. Part of that is that in the federal system, if you show substantial mitigation, so if you take full responsibility at the state level, that can sometimes avoid a federal death sentence pursuit. Whether that happens or not, again, is up to the federal U.S. Attorney's Office. But undoubtedly, both the fact that he decided to take a plea in this case, plus that idea that he was trying to mitigate the bias-motivated charges or the hate charges, I think really, again, strike to his cowardice. He was willing to carry out the most horrific of attacks on unsuspecting victims, and yet didn't have the courage to stand up and face the potential most serious sentence that he could possibly face.
It's for Mr. Allen. Just two things really quickly procedurally. What happens to the other charges that had been filed against him?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this is can be confusing for people that aren't familiar with the criminal justice system. We obviously charged a number of charges, over 300 total charges. Some of those were, I'll just use the murder in the first degree charges. There's after deliberation and with intent, which is what he pled to. We also charge murder in the first degree, extreme indifference. If we go to trial and we achieve conviction on both of those, essentially the sentence merges into one sentence. So essentially, what we did was we just, in the plea agreement, merged all the sentences together for the different theories of the different charges to achieve what we would have achieved at trial, which is the 5 life sentences consecutive plus the 2,208. So essentially, the other charges get dismissed in a situation like this because they would have merged if we had gotten convictions at trial. Does that answer your question? Thanks.
I guess this will go to DA Allen as well. Can you tell us where he will serve out his sentence? Where will he be held?
I hope he serves out his sentence in the smallest, most uncomfortable cell that the state of Colorado can provide him. As to which particular facility, I have no idea. The process for that is that he will be transported from the El Paso County Jail into the Diagnostic and Regional Diagnostic Center up in Denver, which is run by the Colorado Department of Corrections. They will do assessments on the defendant and then determine which facility best suits his particular demands, one of which is going to be, I'm sure, security and that kind of thing. And I'm sure the gravity of the offense is also going to be a big factor in where they send him. I would suspect it'll be at a maximum security prison with the least amount of liberty that he can possibly achieve.
So DA Allen, are you saying you don't believe he was non-binary?
I'm saying that there is zero evidence prior to the shooting that he was non-binary. There was nobody that indicated prior to the shooting that he ever identified as non-binary. He exhibited extreme hatred for the people in the LGBTQ plus community and other minority groups as well, I should say. And so I think it was a stilted effort to, again, avoid any potential bias motivated or hate crimes charges.
And I have a question for the police chief. When you interviewed him, and he said that he was non-binary, whether he was or not, did he explain why he went after the LGBTQ community?
So obviously I wasn't the one that interviewed him, and our team will provide that as part of the interview, as part of the evidence that will go to the federal prosecution. So we won't be answering any specific questions about what he might have said during interviews and things like that at this time.
So he didn't actually submit to a lengthy interview. In fact, it was a very perfunctory interview. It was not in length at all, and I don't believe that he ever said that he was non-binary at that time.
I have another one for Mr. Allen. There were some people speaking today in the court who, expressed anger against the suspect's mother and grandparents for not doing more to stop them. Now looking back on what happened with the first case, with the bomb threat case, do you have any regrets about anything that you did with that case and pursuing it?
The biggest regret I have in that case is that his mother and his grandparents didn't participate in the prosecution effort. And as far as the efforts of the DA's office, I can tell you unequivocally, and you can refer back to the press conference we had, I think it was in early December, once we were able to get that prior case unsealed. We went through extensive efforts to get the victims in that case, his mother and grandparents, served. They went through extensive efforts to avoid or evade service of process, including bragging to people that they knew in the community that they had successfully evaded service of process. We went through efforts to get interstate subpoena process done through the state of Florida and achieved the effort of subpoena service in the state of Florida, and the grandparents evaded that service there as well. Including refusing to answer the door, all kinds of different things. And so the regret I have is not because of anything that happened in our office or from the two prosecutors that were handling that case, because they did exactly what they were supposed to do. It's that the people that could have intervened in this shooter's life, the people that should have been most responsible for his upbringing and making sure that he doesn't do something like this, refused to participate in an effort that would have potentially got him the help that he needed to avoid this from occurring in the first place.
DA Allen, this is something I've wondered since you held that press conference about the court-ordered subpoenas. How can 3 different people willingly violate court-ordered subpoenas? How is that not a violation of either Colorado law or federal law? And if it's not, should it be?
So you're missing a particular step in that, Sean. So essentially, it's not a court order until they're effectively served with the